It's the 12th day of October 2021. Welcome, everyone. I'm Dana Durnford. I'm the nuclearproctologist.org, and we investigate academics and professors and institutions, corporations, and we have always found them wanting, or I should say lying. Nuclear industry, the perpetual lie machine. This is another one of those stories we've already covered at least 1,000 times in the last decade. University covering up for nuclear. And so I apologize to everybody, but that's the way it rolls. We got universities of Colorado State University and the University of Georgia have backed a study. I say that with the utmost disrespect. It says they found few adverse health effects in wildlife after Fukushima nuclear meltdown. After multiple nuclear reactors with decades of reactor cores stored at the top of the buildings, the biggest reactors in the world at the time, lost their entire inventory of 40 years. And there's no adverse side effects. Have a nice day. We're going on vacation. Despite the fact that there was 865,000 extra cancers in just the first year, just 1 year, or a little over 1 year, 865,000 extra cancers. And cancer, that's the gallows laugh, by the way, is the last one to show up. There's 1,800 illnesses and diseases and autoimmune deficiencies and illnesses and injuries will manifest long before cancer. Hard to imagine something more frightening than 5-year-olds marching off to radiated school playgrounds with dosimeters strapped to their chest, because the Geiger counter, you can read it. I have one up in the corner. 270 counts per minute. And that's just gamma. It doesn't count alpha or beta or neutrons or the X-rays from the Bromson-Long effect. Hard to imagine something more frightening is that the universities didn't tell them to evacuate. Instead, they gave them dosimeters so they can study the little lab rats, the human lab rats. Yeah, let's get it over with. Colorado State University. Hey, this is news from the College of Veterinary and Medicine and Biomedical Science, who know jack about nuclear meltdowns or nuclear accidents and have no right to even comment on it, by the way, when they actually have a division of radiation at that university. Why are they using the animal murderers for, I wonder? Eerie fog of silence around Fukushima. First surprising thing is there is no sounds in the no-go zone. X-ray-like images show how radioactivity is spread throughout the bodies of the Fukushima wildlife they could find. And it was all species were shown to be loaded with radiation. Nasty radiation. It's basically the equivalent to miscarriages, stillbirths, and malformations. Tokyo professor couldn't help but feeling pity for the trees. The X-rays image shows the spread of radioactivity. So the wildlife is brutalized. You got 1.4 million atomic decays per kilogram in worm feces. 60 kilometers from the ongoing perpetual nuclear meltdowns. These are absurd numbers. I doubt the researchers actually went there. I find it hard to believe they actually went there. Researchers find few adverse health effects in wildlife because, they couldn't find the wildlife. This might interest you. It's the duty of the scientific community to reduce the public's fear and anxiety about radiation. So this is what you see in these universities are doing. University of Georgia and the Colorado State University stabbing everybody in the back. Head of Fukushima Studies. The head of the Fukushima Health Studies says the effects of radiation do not come to people that are happy. They only come to people that are weak-spirited. And that's the same institution where this university is partnered up with. Gee, what a coincidence that is. Official 311 notebook concerned half of Japan to be covered in nuclear waste. Is 60 and older should be prepared to die at your power plant. And the Tokyo Vice Governor suggested the Fukushima draft all of Japan must face it, unless they're academics from the University of Colorado or Georgia. Fukushima is the most serious man-made disaster in human history by orders of magnitudes. Obesity rates are now nearly double the Japan average. An excessive weight gain after a nuclear crisis is a marker of radiation brain damage. Notice that study is 2015, and so it's surprising that the Colorado State University has ignored all of this and claimed there is no adverse side effects, which brings us to a really quagmire. We've been doing this for many, many years. And so the question tonight is, should it be a crime to produce fake studies like Colorado State University and the University of Georgia did? We have an overwhelming 95% of 22 votes that have a resounding, it should be a crime. And it should be. So the question for everybody is, what should the penalty be? Should it be the death penalty for murdering all the victims by tricking them into going back into a nuclear wasteland? Congenital heart disease operations rose 14% after the Fukushima nuclear accident. Our studies suggest a nuclear accident might increase the risk of complex congenital heart disease. That's not just going to be true for humans, that has to be true for animals and insects and birds and mammals. There was a 14.2% increase in the number of operations per 100,000 live births right across the entire country. That's equal to 14,200 open heart surgeries for neonates and infants. But then the Colorado University and the University of Georgia said there was no adverse side effects. Okay, hang around. Fukushima radiation is still circling the globe, and the levels are consistently rise and fall. Still circling the globe. Still hang on, I'll start yelling there in a second. Bear with me. There we go. Ought to be normal in an unnormal world. The universities and your medias and your regulators and key positions in government have all been captured by the nuclear industry in increments over the last 75 years. And they started up the World Health or United Nations, which is the World Health Organization. It's UNSCLEAR, it's ERPA, it's the IAE. And the nuclear industry has got their children key positions, then their children grew up, got married, had children, and their children got key positions. Their children grew up, blah, 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 blah. And the current generation of entitled, well, they're not humans anymore, we know that much for sure. They have none of the attributes of humans. Get the load of this journalist claiming she's in a building, reactor 4 to the left, 100 feet above the wreckage you see there. That was a 190-foot building.
We are here inside Reactor 4 at the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant that was severely crippled during the earthquake and tsunami of 2011, leading to the country's worst nuclear disaster.
So they're claiming they're in a building that don't exist. We're talking about nuclear meltdowns, so to see if it is appropriate, and there's no reason to put that in the comments section tonight. We're not talking about single doses, we're talking about long-term doses. Listen, if you're going to get your information from the apologist websites, don't post it on my site. I already provided documentation that shows these are perpetual liars. Elevated radiation also up in Germany, Sweden, Slovakia, Poland, Denmark, Austria, Hungary, but not in Fukushima Prefecture, Dana, according to the crazies at the University, well, that's not supposed to be it, the University of Georgia and the Colorado University. Radiation forecast in Japan kept secret to avoid panic in the animal kingdom, according to the University of Georgia. Expert government officials very possibly know Fukushima is the worldwide disaster. They can't neglect the truth because they fear a panic outbreak. So I'm panicking because there is no panic. Radiation forecasts can by no means be released to the public, decided a handful of inbreeds on March the 15th. Japan officials say delay in raising Fukushima to level 7 was because we could have triggered a panicked reaction. You know why you got sirens all around nuclear power plants? It's because activists put that there so that if there's a release, you set the sirens, people say, the wind's blowing that way. I'm going to get out of harm's way. Because you only got moments, right? Prime Minister contemplated evacuating 30 million from Tokyo, and he didn't because of fear of mass panic and chaos. Well, it was actually 36 million. And so they decided to leave them there to get radiated rather than have panic, So this shows you, say nothing happened, but they actually contemplated this because they thought something was going to happen. That enough is to say, wait a second, do we really need something like this on our planet? But it did happen. As I showed you, media pretending you're on a building that don't even exist. Radiation forecasts withheld by universities and governments and regulators. Releasing it would cause panic. And the ministry decided such data would be unavailable due to a loss of power. Because people would want to abandon the communities and they would no longer have a job and a pension. So it's better to kill everybody than lose their jobs. Photographer in Fukushima, it's a panic there. No way to escape as gas stations are closed and rescuers are all gone. So what's the point of a university if all they're going to do is come out and kill us? They didn't drill 5 centimeters into the lid of Unit 2 optics. What are you, lunatic? That was a China syndrome. There is no lid. What are you doing on my site? You know better than that. You're going to have to stop posting propaganda, man. I'm not going to put up with it, okay? Mary Guyden put her name on the story. It's actually really unusual for them to put their names on the story. There's no sparrows as bird watchers in Nagoya. Downtown area was void of any form of birds. Now, normally you would check tadpoles for bioaccumulation of radiation, say for instance. There's no tadpoles. So all they got is the great beak animals, the migratory animals, and large animals. Clear that low-level contamination probably more dangerous than a single dose. Grasshoppers with deformed wings, gray eyes, not reds. Birds with abnormal sperm, strange, large tumors, white spots on them. See, 50 becquerels a kilogram in a human leads to irreversible lesions in vital organs. Irreversible lesions in vital organs. And we're bigger than most of the animals that are in the forest in Japan, except for bears, say, right? And deer. Well, we're actually bigger than a lot of deer. So it's much more significant for them. And because they're in that environment all the time, where it bioaccumulates, there's one community, for instance, extreme increase in mortality caused by cardiac diseases, and death rates might give the creeps to some people. The number of deaths were up in this one community in a single month period. By 12,700 people died of heart attacks compared to the same month as the year before. There's a street there in Fukushima where 7 people died, dropped dead on the side of the road on a single street. There's no harm to the animals, according to the crazies. Colorado State University, University of Georgia has decided to kill them all and let evil sort it all out. It's really something. Okay. Now, I've done lots of research. Lots and lots of research. Species counts all the way up by Alaska. What illness of the mind must people have to lie about the threat? That's a question the Colorado State University, University of Georgia should be asking. Their families should be asking them, what are they doing? Take hope, this Fukushima disaster map is fake. So they showed us the fake map from NOAA of dispersal, and that was a tsunami map, when NOAA actually had a dispersal of radiation.
May be worse than thought. Studies from last year indicate that radioactive water will contaminate the entire Pacific Ocean in just 6 years. Kim Min-ji reports.
This graphic shows the gradual contamination of the Pacific Ocean due to leaks of radioactive water from the crippled Fukushima nuclear plant in Japan. The simulation, which was run by a German marine research institute, shows the entire Pacific waters being polluted by radioactive water in just 6 years.
6 years. Well, actually, it takes about 50 days for it to cross the ocean, to cross your current. But it was airborne. This is France's map of the dispersal, and it was only venting put into that model, not the actual nuclear meltdowns. So the radiation covered all of Japan, all continuous plume, Pacific, covered all of the United States and Canada, all of Iceland, Greenland, all of Europe, all of the Atlantic Ocean, in a continuous, non-stop plume. Continuous. Invisible. Now, so that's global warming, right? Pulsing energy every second at the speed of light. Think about how much energy it takes to make something go the speed of light. That's called global warming. Oil, gas, and coal emissions don't have these attributes. You don't create plumes like that circling the planet and pulsing energy every second for millions of years. The only thing that has that attribute is nuclear. Rain with 20 million particles of fission products per liter. So for every iodine-131, there's 10 times more iodine-132, 30 times more iodine-133, 31 times more iodine-129, iodine-132, and iodine-133 are 9 times more effective ionizing and radiating your thyroids than the 131. The 131 is extremely effective. By the way, cesium-137, 134 will also aggregate in your thyroid. But what this means is there's up to 1,000 different fission products in the liter. of rainfall per liter. We have corresponding studies. Cesium remained dispersed throughout the water column from the surface to the ocean floor 2012. So not 6 years, but 6 days. The entire Pacific Ocean covered in a continuous plume. By day 7 and 8, the Atlantic Ocean was covered in a continuous plume. That never goes away, pulsing energy every second. But hey, Dana, Colorado State University and University of Georgia said there ain't no harm, Dana. You're fear-mongering. Hang around. Hang around there, little one. Fukushima has humanity on the brink of a possible worldwide nuclear holocaust. Celebrated physician. The world as we know it has changed, and the effects on our health are incomprehensible. Actually, they're not. Deteriorating plant threatens mass extinction around the world. Does that by the plume, the radioactive fallout, continuously falling out? Uranium, plutonium, curium, isotopes, by the way, are the biggest byproduct of the radiated fuel rods. So we launched research expeditions to Alaska year after year after year. Okay, well, I did. And so what I done was I went up through the whole coastline to Alaska each year. 4.3 miles per hour. Back and forth. 3.9 knots. 4.6 miles per hour, blah, blah, blah. Anyway. There's Calvert Island. The bottom of it, we're inside, no ground swells now, or they're calming down. We got the big sail up. Then we got the mainsail up. I have to straighten up this one because it's taking some of the wind from the big one. Woo! So we're in behind Calvert Island, got some shelter. It's 20 after 1 now. I dropped the spinnaker down a little bit, the pole, the whisker pole. We're getting 3.6 knots, 4 miles per hour. I was back and forth. You're towing the boat. Towing the boat with the wind behind you. Well, there's not a lot of wind. There we go. Now we're flying. So what I done was research expeditions for 4 to 5 months at a time, where I would go out and wouldn't come home for 100 to 120, 160 days. And I never stopped. Every single day, and it was rarely nice conditions like this. This was unusual. If only it was always like that, eh? Ah, yes, if only it was always like that. So, done the whole coastline, doing species counts. And what we discovered, to our horror, was all the species are actually missing. Yeah, I took the Geiger counter with me on those trips. 308 counts per minute on my Geiger counter right now. Top right-hand corner. Well, it was 325. Come on. Stop doing that. Say, that's not funny. And quit that. Okay, that's a bit better. It's not good either, but it's better than 325 counts a minute. So, these are before and after in the same place. So year after year I went back to the same places. The species never come back. The ocean is supposed to be a soup of life. Which means that, say I went and plowed all that stuff and put it in a dump truck and took it inland and burnt it. All those creatures. The creatures from deeper on both sides will just fill up that gap, see? But they didn't. This is British Columbia, Canada. There's 27,000 islands up there. And the species to your left now, you'll never take those pictures again. So why don't Colorado State University, University of Georgia go up there and check my research? So 7,000 plus species, highly visible species, are gone. These are before and after authentic pictures in the same place. And so I do it at low tide because there's an 18-foot tide exchange. As you can see to the left, the colors are very visible to your left. Notice that? So it stands out very, very, very good. So here's a little short video of me coming in on a beach amongst 27,000 islands right by Alaska, a couple of miles away from Alaska. And you'll see for yourself there's no color on the coastline, which means Alaska is stripped too. Gonna go take a pee before it takes off? Yeah? So there's nothing left on the coastline. That's low tide, right by Alaska with an 18-foot tide exchange. All your species to the left are gone because I went there and checked it myself year after year. It's terrifying how the Pacific ecosystem has collapsed since Fukushima. Plutonium and uranium suspected of spreading throughout the food chain, not the iodine, which is the distraction. And it's a bad one, but it's not what you're worried about. So when you see the species to the left now are permanently gone, you'll never take the pictures again. You think Colorado State University should go up and find out if I'm wrong? Deteriorating plant threatens mass extinction around the world. And that's exactly what's happening. And it does that with the radioactive fallout. This is another model of the Xenon-133. I'm going to speed it up to double its speed. And that's March the 19th, March the 20th, March the 21st, March the 23rd. You can see America's buried, Canada's buried, the Northwest Territories are buried, the Pacific and Atlantic now are buried. Now the model stops there. Do you really think the plume stopped? If you do, you need to go learn about models. The plume doesn't stop. So you can never take these pictures again. That's permanently now extinct due to the Fukushima by radioactive fallout, right? And I went there and personally double-checked year after year after year, 4 to 5 months at a time. And the species are gone. They're gone. It was usually like this. This is what it usually looked like. And it was usually like this at the end of the day when I'm heading back to the big boat. I actually washed up on the rocks that night, 3:30 in the morning in a hurricane. So they said no damage around the Fukushima plant. It's just everywhere else. There was no species around the plant to check. West Coast gray whale population plummeted since 2016. Over 6,000 dead whales. Of just the gray whales, come on, system. And so we had unusual mortality events for many other species. It wasn't just the gray whales. I forgot to import it. Here we go. So you had unusual mortality events for right whales, humpback whales, gray whales, of course, and minke whales. So it wasn't just gray whales, but we see them starving to death because they eat smaller food on the food chain, right? They're more dependent upon the basis of the food chain, the oxygen chain, the carbon sequestering chain. The Fukushima crisis comes to the United States. Professor, new and improved versions of the original atomic plague is spreading that the truth is so incomprehensible. It's easier to pretend it doesn't exist. Die off of mammals, birds, reptiles in the United States. So many diseases afflicting such a wide variety of animals, names out of a science fiction thriller, hemorrhagic diseases, Slovactic plagues. Top scientists, Fukushima is the most terrifying situation I can imagine. I've seen a paper that says it's bye-bye Japan and to evacuate the North America west coast if reactor 4 goes after the quake and the rods are exposed. Of course, I showed you that earlier. It caught fire and blew up and blew up and caught fire and blew up. That's reactor 4 over there, and the fuel pools were at the very top of the buildings. They got 2 fuel pools there. Because they have no repository anywhere on the planet, let alone Japan, these pools are, with no containment by the way, still splitting the atom, are stuffed. And of course, if you have a problem with a reactor, how are you supposed to get the fuel at the top of the building? And so the people that made this design are actually still alive and should be charged with what they've done. Sailor, after we left Japan, it felt like the ocean itself was dead. Nothing alive for 3,000 miles. No turtles or dolphins or sharks or birds. And he saw one whale with a tumor on his head. This is a professional sailing crew, $1 million vessel that's crossed the ocean 10 times in races. And they couldn't believe they couldn't find any species. In the history of science, we've never seen anything like the Fukushima plume heading across the Pacific, the US and Canada. Why is Japan allowed to get away with contaminating the ocean? Because the universities, the schools of mass destruction helps them and manipulates you. Fukushima radioactive plume contaminated the entire northern hemisphere in a relatively short period of time. And the US government concluded Fukushima disaster could spread to a global scale. But physics.org, of course, because they're a lobbyist group, right? They were bought by a lobbying group. Few adverse health effects. They pumped out Colorado University fake story. I get that back into my pile here. So Colorado State University, University of Georgia. So the question then is, should it be a crime to produce fake studies like the Colorado State University, University of Georgia did? With 31 votes, 97, 97% says it should be a crime. What should be the penalty? Should professors lose their degrees? Should their parents have to beat them to death with baseball bats? Whatever you think. Anything you can come up with, I like to hear it. I like that actually. Their parents, they should be convicted of producing fake studies that harm and kill and murder people who are tricked into going back, who are disarmed, and by deception and deceit to fake studies. And so the whole chain of people that produced a fake study, their parents, by law, should have to beat them to death with baseball bats. And that would be a deterrent, an incentive for other degenerate scum academics not to produce fake studies. Does that make sense? I like it. Fukushima is the most important issue going on in the world. Everyone should stop what they're doing and work together to come up with solutions, not cover it up. And covering it up, as you'll see when I get to the story here, radiation health specialists see children with 11 Beck will start to see heart problems. So if you trick families into going back into a nuclear wasteland, it's murder. It's actually murder. It's the genocide on top of that. It's so evil, it defies that reality that somebody would actually put their name on a study encouraging people to go back into a nuclear wasteland. It actually defies it. Like, what? Somebody done what? It seems unreal. Like, it can't be. You got to be wrong, Dana. No, I'm not, unfortunately. So we've seen all kinds of media picking up the story and running with it. This is why I'm forced to come out and try to bludgeon them. Women from Fukushima, is as if the children are in a gas chamber. The children are breathing radiation every moment. Even the degenerate UK Daily Mail, and they're the scum of the scum on top of that, came out with the exact same words, the exact same pictures, the exact same paragraph with the exact same author in order to promote the Colorado State University, the University of Georgia fake study. I'll get to it in a minute, the actual study. Few adverse health effects in wildlife exposed to low levels of radiation from Fukushima nuclear accident. Newsbreak. So there's all kinds of media just ran with this story. That's great. Nuclear is wonderful. Move back there and die. Researchers find few adverse health effects. So you see the story is moving out. So it's when you see it's hard to imagine something more frightening than 5-year-olds marching off to radiated school playgrounds with dosimeters strapped to their chest. It's nothing more frightening than that is the academics that said, no, stay there, here's a dosimeter. Instead of we should evacuate the children when we're in a nuclear wasteland, they said, no, this is great. I can study them for decades and retire, and my children can get an education, come back and study them when they're older. The definition of actual evil, eh? IAEA today admits there's no such thing as a safe level of radiation. No such thing. In fact, that their standards are based on a healthy adult, and they're based on benefit, not safety. So they're based on homeostasis. Or homesis. So we have tourist laws and we abandon our communities because it's not like a banana, it's not like a potato chip, it's not like walking in sunshine, not like getting on an airplane, not like climbing a mountain, not like sleeping next to somebody. Okay? All right. Okay. Crazies. Government promos, less than a stomach x-ray of radiation per day. If you get a stomach x-ray every single day, you're going to die in a month. So please come visit Fukushima. The children can even go outside once a month. Well, actually, they can't. Elementary school in Japan uses water bottles to shield students from radiation. So it's hard to imagine something more frightening. 5-year-olds marching off to radiated school grounds with dosimeters strapped to their chest because they can't go to the playgrounds anymore. They got to go stay in school. And wait till you see this story. Then we'll get into their story. An elementary school 34 miles away from Fukushima Daiichi nuclear meltdowns is using water bottles to shield radiation coming from the courtyard and other areas around the school. The bottles are filled with water and placed inside of square boxes which are stacked around the classroom. So rather than evacuate the children, this is what they're doing. Because academic world is convinced them for some reason that the academics are like, no, you got to keep the kids there. Just put bottles of water in boxes. They'll be okay. You got the dosimeters we sent you? Yeah, okay, good. According to the school, it seems to have reduced the radiation levels inside by 1/3. I usually crack up whenever I do this story because it just doesn't seem real, right? It just doesn't seem real that the academic world is, no, just put bottles of water in boxes and stack them outside the classroom. You get less of a dose each day. Okay? If you need some boxes, we'll get them sent to you. The bottles are filled with water and placed inside the square boxes, which are stacked around the classroom. And residents of Koriyama City have been concerned about the high amount of radioactive material which has been found around their town. And school lunches are tested for radiation. Parents are concerned because they are largely unable to find out where the items were originally produced. And so if you use the Geiger counter to check the food, you can only find gamma. And you're probably not going to find all of it, by no means. And you're not going to find alpha or beta or neutrons, which is, it's absurd. Okay, so how many of these bags do you think they picked up? There's a new number.
There's about 60 million tons of contaminated soil that's being stored, planned to be stored, outside the Fukushima Daiichi perimeter fence. So
60 million one-ton bags. That's 10 rows of traffic right around the planet. If you put a one-ton bag on the back of a one-ton pickup, and bumper to bumper, like paint off the bumper stuff, it'll be 10 rows of traffic, continuous rows right around the planet, where you got to walk over 10 rows of cars, trucks, to get to the other side of the road. There was just a little leak there, Data. And that's only a fraction, by the way, because there was criminal complaints over fake forest decontamination work, where they didn't even pick up the bags at all. They just pretended they did. And there was 12,900 sites where there was no change in the radiation. Did not see radiation doses fall below pre-decontamination levels. A survey by the Board of Audit of Japan has showed. Okay, well, let's do it. Let's do it. The crazies, aka Colorado State University and the University of Georgia, found no adverse health effects. News from the scumbag veterinary medicine and degenerate science. And by Mary Scumbag, mass murderer, genocide machine. So normally you're going to look at tadpoles, right? Or small species. You're not going to look at great big animals. That's a new one, right? I've never seen them claim that this is the way to go before. The research team studied rat, snakes, and wild boar across the radiation exposures, DNA damage. They never done jack, which is evident. Radiation dose rates led to the evacuation of 150,000. It was actually almost 500,000. And residents from an area estimated were evacuated from an area estimated at 444 square miles. It was actually around 3,600 square kilometers. But this is what the universities do. They've been captured a long time ago, and now they're weaponized against all species and humanity. Although people were evacuated, wildlife remains within the Fukushima exclusion zone, as it is sometimes called. Well, what an incredible, weird statement. So this was probably written by the nuclear industry, and they just signed their name on it and got a kickback for it, or a grade or something. The Fukushima exclusion zone, as it is sometimes called. Generations of animals have since been exposed to radiation levels above the safety threshold for human occupancy. And the crazies at the Colorado State University, University of Georgia launched graduate student programs in collaboration with, you guessed it, the demonic Fukushima University Institute of Environmental Radioactivity, which was created after the nuclear meltdowns to downplay the adverse side effects, to conduct research on the effects of lifelong radiation exposures to wildlife. that don't even exist down there no more. Their most recent results were published online in Environmental International and appears in the October issue of the journal. What health effects have researchers found for wildlife in the Fukushima exclusion zone, said scumbags? Dr. Kelly Cunningham, a veterinarian, first author of the paper. She's not a nuclear expert or a nuclear academic or a nuclear scientist, or she's not even married to one. She's a veterinarian. And a recent graduate of the CSU Doctor of Veterinary Medicine program said the biggest takeaway is that perhaps people do not need to be fearful of moving back into a nuclear wasteland. Following this type of chronic low-dose environmental radiation exposures. This is not a low dose. First off, 6 in 10 Fukushima children tested have diabetes. Kelly. Now, so should she have her degree taken away from her for doing this, which seems reasonable, and should it be a crime to produce fake studies like Colorado State University, University of Georgia did? Should what they're doing here be a crime to pretend that it's okay and to coerce and trick and deceive and manipulate people into putting their loved ones in harm's way and ultimately being murdered? Should that be a crime? What should be the punishment? Because if they're going to murder thousands of people by tricking them into going back, should they get the death penalty for doing this? Should Kelly Cunningham, Dr. Kelly Cunningham, get the death penalty for trying to trick people into going back into a nuclear wasteland? I think she should, or it should. I can't call her a human anymore. She stopped being a human when she tried to murder all these victims. The wildlife study is relevant to humans because human psychology is not so dissimilar to wild boars, said co-author James Beasley. Now, we've covered this creep before. Associate professor from the University of Georgia Savannah River Ecology Lab, where he done a study on tadpoles. We'll get to that coming up. James Beasley, I remember him. A real degenerate. While mice have traditionally been used as a radiation biology model from which human effects are extrapolated, pigs, which are descendants of wild boars, are more like humans than mice. And thus, the more appropriate model species, Beasley says. And Hiroko, a co-author and project assistant professor at Fukushima Degenerate University, said the research helped respond to questions from local victims trapped in a nuclear wasteland. So in Fukushima, there have been many unfounded rumors about health effects related to radioactivity. Unfounded rumors. Like, good God, man, it's a nuclear wasteland. Unfounded rumors, eh? Hang on. I'll show you how lunatic the whole country is suffering from radioactive brain damage. I'm not trying to be mean, hang on. I'll show you exactly what I mean by that. This picture is from mainstream media in Japan saying that the farmer growing food and harvesting it right alongside of thousands of one-ton bags of radiation is being picked on because people say his food might be radioactive. Now, if you're growing food in a nuclear wasteland, first off, there should be snipers that shoot the farmers that do that. Second off, it's impossible for it not to be radioactive. It's in a nuclear wasteland. So the reactors are still melting down and they're right back trying to grow food. Not trying to, but they are growing food there. There's another one. Harvesting food right alongside of thousands and thousands of one-ton bags of radiation. Like, this is absurd. With hopes of explaining the situation, many local people took part in research activities, including capturing wild boars. Thomas Hilton, a co-author of the paper, retired professor from Fukushima University, who got his degree at CSU, California State University, or Colorado State University, said environmental radiation decreased precipitously after the accident. It's still melting down, and no, it didn't. I just showed you earlier, 12,000 places, the radiation didn't change. By the time, well, like, uranium's not going away for millions of years. The plutonium's not going away for hundreds of thousands of years. The curium's never going to go away. And the biggest byproduct of radiated fuel rod is curium isotopes. And you need lead shielding that's 20 times thicker than you do for plutonium isotopes. By the time and so now, once again, you see the dreaded word cesium. And they're using 134, for goodness sakes, with a 2-year half-life, which has 10 half-lives. And they're trying to utilize that in order to trick and deceive and manipulate people. Got his master's and bachelor's and doctorate degree from Colorado State University. And Colorado State University professor Susan Bailey, her parents should be the people that have to pull the switch on the electric chair when she's convicted of genocide if people move back in there. Is an expert on assessing markers of stress and DNA damage. You don't have to be an expert on that. You just have to get a Geiger counter and go down there. You know it's not safe to be there. We didn't see any changes related to radiation doses. Really? 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 And we didn't see it in the snakes either, said the snake. The snake said this finding is supported by the fact that the animal populations are thriving in areas where humans have not returned. In populations, it means wild boars. This is a lunatic assertion. This is not science, this is evilness. It's similar to what we're seeing in Chernobyl. Yeah, like you ever been to Chernobyl? I'll show you what it looks like in Chernobyl, Susan. Some hard case, boy. The question is, why do professors and doctors and academics hate humans? What's up with that, right? Well, Belarus and Ukraine is full of orphanages. It's full of orphanages. So if you were in Chernobyl, the first thing you should be doing is going over to Belarus and Ukraine and studying all the radiation victims that are abandoned. They don't even have a color TV or a radio because people like Susan are spent their whole career trying to destroy the truth. These kids have no one to love them. They have no future. No one to care for them. They don't even have someone to buy them a friggin' radio. Well, Susan is out drinking champagne and lattes and fancy clothes and big cars and throwing parties. And these children don't even have a TV to keep them distracted because they're messed up because of Chernobyl. And so this is your carbon-free nuclear. You liking it? Isn't it cool? Isn't nuclear cool? Isn't nuclear wonderful? Yeah, give me some nuclear, they said. Additional co-authors, murderers, they should be convicted for producing fake studies to trick people into going into a nuclear wasteland. And then their parents should have to beat them to death with baseball bats. You disgusting parasites. Nothing but contempt for you. Unbelievable contempt for you scumbags. You degenerate cowards, you murderers, you trash, you human trash, you scum. Go get a real job. Go get a real education. Radioactive tadpoles reveal contamination clues. James Beasley. Oh, why didn't he study boars over there? Why did he look at tadpoles? Advisor Associate Professor said how quickly a species reaches the threshold level accumulation is vital to determine its use as a biomonitor of the contaminants. Tadpoles are more likely to reflect local contamination levels according to Beasley. Except if you're in Fukushima, then you're only looking at boars and snakes because that's all you can find. Growing concern over a workers' shortage of Fukushima Daiichi by government and TEPCO, which is TEPCO's nationalized, right? They went bankrupt right away. So Colorado State University has the Radiological and Nuclear Safety Division. They didn't go to Fukushima. The mentally handicapped are working at Fukushima plant after the meltdown, not Colorado State University. The mentally disabled are working at Fukushima. The homeless people are treated like disposable people, not Colorado State University or the University of Georgia. Homeless people are being sold to companies that put to work at the nuclear meltdown. That's Forbes. Forbes is degenerate cowards. Not the Colorado State University. And not the University of Georgia. Yeah? The homeless are taken to work in Fukushima ready to die. Radiological nuclear safety from the Colorado State University won't go near it. But they'll produce studies to trick people into going into the nuclear meltdown area and get them murdered. Some people not be given food, they have no place to go. Does that sound like Colorado State University or the homeless and the destitute and the victims of society and the immigrants who don't speak the language who are the actual real heroes? Some co-workers are really tempered and they use violence. Unfortunately, these scum degenerate cowards never went there. It's the victims of society, see? Government model shows the radioactive gases near Tokyo, a couple of 100 kilometers away, is 10 billion times normal levels. So 30 billion or something. Or 300 billion, rather. University of Georgia. Let us brainwash your children into tricking people into going into danger zones and getting killed. Columbia medical professor inhaling just one hot particle can cause a cancer. University of Georgia professor, no, go out and suck it up. Watch babies being born. This year we'll be working at the Fukushima Daiichi one day. And the University of Georgia and the University of Colorado is not trying to come up with solutions. They're trying to trick the victims into murdering their children by going back into a nuclear wasteland. Crackdown. Japan's professor arrests extremely unjust. Publicly opposed burning of radioactive debris. Well, I can guarantee you that wasn't the Colorado State University professor. Shooting nuclear waste into the sun. Space disposal considered by Obama. It's 2013, because they were getting it then. They were understanding we're in real trouble. If it melts down in our country, we're done. Imagine sending your children to Colorado State University. What a betrayal to your children, eh? If we do nothing, even Tokyo could become off-limited. And so Colorado State University, University of Georgia, are not trying to come up with solutions. They're trying to murder their loved ones and friends and families down there. Concern over plutonium and uranium being deposited reconcentrated far away. Isotopes transferred to land via sea spray, aerosol, flooding, human exposures by inhalation, food, and contact. Welcome back to Scumland at Colorado State University. Top government nuclear official warned Tokyo may have to be evacuated. Colorado, no, it's okay. Bring your children in there. Eat the local food. LA Times, top NRC official in Japan compares Fukushima to Neverland. And at the same time, the US warned France about publishing extremely high radiation doses for infants in Tokyo, because Tokyo was buried in radioactive fallout, yeah? Colorado State University, we'll murder them all. Donate now. Former Japan Prime Minister seals polar bears dying after Fukushima radiation exposure. Former Japan Prime Minister. So who's right? The Colorado State University, there's no harm, or the former Prime Minister of Japan, I wonder? Top radiation experts, 50 becquerels a kilogram in humans lead to irreversible lesions in the vital organs. Like that's, you're game over, that happens to you. And they're shipping food, minimum of 100 becquerels a kilogram of just, they're only checking for cesium, but they're not actually checking for cesium. We've been doing this for years and years and years. They're not checking. They're insane. They never stop growing it there. They're growing 850 million pounds of rice a year just in the Fukushima prefecture itself. Because Fukushima prefecture used to be the breadbasket of the Asian countries. And they're determined to keep it that way. Just poison everybody. As long as the Colorado State University gets a budget, murder's on the agenda, baby. Radiation health specialists, children with over 11 becquerels a kilogram start to see heart problems. So how can the University of Georgia and University State, Colorado State University, University of Georgia, how can they justify killing the victims, I wonder? There used to be 1 in a million children with thyroid tumors pre-Fukushima nuclear meltdown. I'll adjust the audio on the fly here.
But there's clear evidence rates have risen. Before the disaster in 2011, the rate of thyroid cancer was between 1 and 2 cases in every million children.
Right, and now it's 13,646 out of 40,000. It's 36%. You scale it up, that's 360,000 out of a million. There's 1,800 illnesses and diseases and autoimmune deficiencies and injuries that'll manifest and diagnose. And my poll is over? What the hell, man? How the hell did my poll end? Where did my poll go? What the hell? I don't got a poll no more. I'm going to put it back up. I'm going to stick it back up there because somehow that poll got cancelled. Give me a second, I start that poll again. What the hell, man? What the hell, man? What the hell? Oh. What was that all about? I don't know. One more try here. Stick that poll back up. So the poll says, got censored. Should pop back up there any second. So, should it be a crime to produce fake studies like Colorado State University did and the University of Georgia did? Should that be a crime? I think it should be a crime. So we're up to 5 votes, 100%. Let's keep it rolling here. Thyroid abnormalities. By the way, the female, so these numbers, when you see these type of numbers, that's going to be true for insects. Percentages going to be a lot worse, right, for mammals and animals and birds and stuff like that, because they're closer to the ground. They're like, so the radiation is pulsing energy at the speed of light, almost the speed of light. They hit each other almost at the speed of light, and it's called Bromson lung, where it breaks and then changes direction. That creates an X-ray effect. So you got gamma, alpha, neutron, beta, and X-rays. But that type of X-ray is caused by the speed of light breaking and changing direction. This sterilizes all the insects, all the females. So the females are disproportionately harmed, is what we're seeing. So 55% of the Fukushima girls tested have thyroid abnormalities, aka tumors, 11 to 15 of age. Fukushima girls have 3 times more thyroid cysts over 15 millimeters than boys, and 79% more medium-sized tumors than boys. So the Colorado State University, they just hate us. They hate all the species, all 8 million species, with just this incredible contempt for us. So they flew over the prefecture, the U.S. government, at 1,000 feet. So it tells you how big of a pulse this stuff has. And 3 million becquerels, the red is 3 million becquerels per square meter, for instance. A 1,000 feet above the ground. Per square meter, 20 kilometers away from the plant. But that was just iodine-131, and that was in April. But the models, I showed you the models earlier, they cover the entire northern hemisphere. I'll show you another one very quick here, I guess. So it's not just Fukushima. This is what you want you to believe, right? So they want you to think it's just located in Fukushima Prefecture. That's the Pacific Ocean. That's America and Canada and Iceland, Greenland. That's the Atlantic. The plume never stopped. It's still coming out of there. High radiation levels in Tokyo, 29 million becquerels a square meter after rainfall. These are just like, Hollywood couldn't come up with these numbers pre-Fukushima. All the western U.S., most of the East Coast, Midwest Canada covered with airborne particles at various altitudes. This was based solely on the number 1 reactor explosion. Most of the models are based on venting. They're not even based on the detonation or the nuclear meltdown or the loss of the inventories. What should be done about Japan burning radioactive debris? Well, they should get all the University of Colorado and Georgia should have to go down and stomp it out. Don't give them any fire retardant equipment or protection. Serious questions arise about the Canadian government failed to alert the public about the Fukushima radioactive rain after Fukushima. Yeah, because Taiwan told everybody to stay home and get rid of their clothes. South Korea told everybody to stay home and get rid of their clothes. Canada's like, I ain't saying jack, because they took all the Canadian pension and invested in uranium stocks right away, so nobody can rat them out. The biggest threat to our planet is academics that lie like this, and the nuclear industry, of course. Press watches government dumps radioactive waste in Tokyo. So they should have done the research in Tokyo. That's where all the radiation went, Dana. And they should have done the research in British Columbia, because that's where all the radiation went, Dana. Tokyo to begin burning, that's sarcasm, folks, to begin burning massive amounts of radioactive waste, at least 2.5 years. Burning radioactive waste. That's dirty bombs. It's absurd. If I burn radioactive waste, that's a crime, rightfully so. If they burn it, it's a big deal. So they're water reclamation facilities. So you read that headline, it doesn't really resonate, does it? 1,500 tons of highly radioactive sludge. Highly radioactive. Think about those words only. 1,500 tons of highly radioactive sediment. There's actually 50,000 tons of the sediment is from the water reclamation facilities. So where they're filtering the waters for the community, that sludge is so radioactive, 50,000 one-ton pickup trucks for a single community. Drinking the water is a death sentence, right? It's a disease factory. Deteriorating plant threatens mass extinction around the world. I showed you earlier. Nuclear engineer, I agree Fukushima can be an extinction event. Report experts agree many species of wildlife and fisheries are endangered globally due to Fukushima. Michio Kaku, famous physicist from the United States, human civilization may destroy itself. I mean, look at Fukushima. Liquefaction. There's actually 4 reactor cores and 4 spent fuel pools that we can quantify. But they redacted 736 pictures in January that from the original, they took originally and released them this year. And they showed reactor 6, all the pictures of reactor 6 of the 736 pictures were all redacted. And the common spent fuel pool, which was at ground level when the tsunami came through, all of them were redacted. There's only one reason you're going to do that, is because they had meltdowns. But we can quantify 4 nuclear meltdowns, and each fuel pool had around 2,600 assemblies. Each one of them were around 1,800 pounds. So 2,600 tons, basically, per fuel pool. And there's 2 at the top of each building, because you don't have a repository anywhere on the planet. The pools are stuffed. Nobel Prize winner, the only way to preserve the human, and all of it's gone, melted down. China syndrome, or was dispersed into the atmosphere and covered the planet in invisible continuous plumes. Only way to preserve the human life is to completely turn away from nuclear power. Nobel Prize winner. Major U.S. paper trying to quit nuclear power altogether threatens the very existence of human civilization as we know it. Once a nuclear action occurs, everything is over. Zero prospects of ever restoring the oceans, of course, because how are you going to restore an ocean? All we lost, that's the reality of nuclear energy. Nuclear power generation is the only invention may destroy the future of humans, and you can't do that without destroying the future of all 8 million species. 1,000 years from now, contaminated water will be hemorrhaging from Fukushima. And an enlightened statement, we may not be able to live in Japan someday. No, you won't be able to live in Japan someday. That's the reality of nuclear energy. So then the question should always be, why not come up with solutions? Why pretend it's not happening? What's the point of pretending that it's not happening? Right, you know? So I got 400 subscribers, barely, since I started this site a little over a month ago. Because I took down my site with 24,000 subscribers while I was on a research expedition 450 miles away from home looking for spiders. They're missing from the woods here on the East Coast. There should be like 150 per square meter in the forest, but there's none. And so traveling across the province here on the East Coast, no spiders. We talked to researchers from Halifax, no spiders there either. And the spiders bioaccumulate radiation 1,000% more than background because they're eating insects that are bioaccumulating it, right? And there was no fish jumping in the ponds, no flocks of birds. We're in the biggest migratory spot on the planet. There's 46 million migratory birds are supposed to come through here each year. and Baccaloo Island, which I might head down to this week. We had major storms here over and over and over. Can't get the boat in the water. And so the University of Colorado and Georgia, was it? I don't belong there. University of Georgia and Colorado State University. They put out fake studies saying there's no adverse side effects from the radioactive fallout. Should that be a crime? Telling people to go back into a nuclear meltdown with a fake study, shouldn't that be a crime? And should it be a crime that carries the death penalty? I think it should carry the death penalty, and that their parents should have to execute the death penalty, whatever way the justice system sees fit to carry out the death penalty. Once again, I prefer that the death penalty for these types of crimes where their genocide is involved, that their parents have to beat them to death with baseball bats as a deterrent, so other freaks of nature don't produce fake studies that will murder generations of people. At what point are we going to punish these creatures? These are not humans that are producing these studies. You've got to be a monster. You have to be a monster to produce studies to trick people to go back into a nuclear wasteland. And you have to be a monster to not want to evacuate the children from a nuclear wasteland. To give them dosimeters. You have to be exceptionally evil. And this is one of the common denominators we see with the people in the nuclear industry is they don't understand what life is. They don't seem to covet life at all, including their own. So the poll tonight was, should it be a crime to make fake studies like Colorado State University and University of Georgia has done, and is now going to percolate out all over the internet? All kinds of different medias are now running with it in the last 24 hours. And what, I get 32 people on my show. Going on for a decade. Took me a whole decade to get 32 people on my live shows. That's the problem with being honest, is there's 1,000 public relation firms, some of them at the Colorado State University. Their job is to come out and destroy the truth. Why not get a real job, right? Why not actually get a real job? They can go get these incredible educations, and then you take a job being incredibly evil. Why? What's the point of it? Yeah, good night, everybody. It's another long day. Yeah, good night, folks. I'm just going to let it go with that. I'm burnt out. I've been at this all day. And they cancelled my gimbal. Never gave me an explanation for why they cancelled. They said they reserved the right to cancel any order. I got to try to order with somebody else, I suppose. Why not evacuate the children? Why do that? See? What's the point of having a degree if you're not going to do something good? Why not get a job and do something good? Why have a job where all you do is evilness? What's the point of that? I don't know. I don't understand it. But we've done this, covered this topic 1,000 times. 1,000 times at least in the last decade. We've covered academics being monsters. When does it stop? I'm going to have a poll about that, I suppose. God bless and hugs for everybody. We'll see everybody tomorrow night. Have a great one.